if you were still in CIA today and you were still active with the spy network and everything that you understand how United States work, how India works, how would you explain India to the America right now? Because India from 50 years ago was very different.
Yeah.
India today is very different. Forget 50, 20 years ago, India was different, and today India is very different. India used to be dependent on certain people or certain countries. Now we're not. India used to be very neutral. Now we still are neutral, but with our clear stance as well.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier, we used to not comment on anything. Now we are clear that Indian rights, Indian interests, national interests over anything in anyone's ideology. Indians have started calling out for the first time about the Western hypocrisy, about the games that United States have been playing with China, Russia, India, Pakistan. We say it out loud.
Right.
We are focusing on our economy. We're focusing on our citizens' interest. We're focusing on just us at this point. And that's why we're friends with everyone and we want to just trade. So today's India is different.
Right.
And we already spoke about RAW and CIA before, right? So we are in a much better position. How would you explain India to America's president right now?
If I was director of CIA and I had a meeting with the president, I would say, there's all these countries in the world that are making noise to get attention. Russia's making noise, Ukraine's making noise, France is making noise, China's making noise, North Korea is making noise. All of the noise-making countries are not who we should be focused on. We need to focus on the quietest countries that yield the most power. And the top of that list is India. India is a quiet country. You don't create conflict. You don't argue just to argue. You are correct. You are more confident and more politically verbose than you've ever been, but only when asked.
Yeah.
You're not out there waving a flag and making noise just to make noise. You're not trying to get everybody to notice India.
True.
India is saying, we're focused on India. And when something else intersects with us, we stand our ground. And we'll make the headlines that day. But we don't make the headlines the next day. Whereas in the United States, we literally do whatever we can to make the headlines every day. So I would warn the US president, hey, if you think of a jungle, if the world is a jungle, India is the panther. It's deadly, but it's black. It hides in the night. If you don't look for its eyes, you won't even know it's there. And it doesn't hunt everything, but it hunts when it needs to hunt. And if you're going to hunt the panther, you need to be ready for a fight, right? That's very different than China, which is like the rhinoceros, right? It's very different than Canada, which is like the hippo. There's all these, North Korea is the snake, right? You got all these countries that kind of represent these different categories in the jungle, but there's only one that has the teeth and the claws to do real damage, but it selects when it fights. And that is India.
Interesting way to describe India. What do you think is the biggest strength of India right now? And what's the biggest weakness?
Two great questions. So I think one of the biggest trends in India is education. I think India understands that it has a large population that it has to educate, and it's constantly trying to find ways to expand that education through food programs, through social programs, government programs. I mean, there are so many children that are so far in rural India that are so underserved that the government understands that a big part of what makes them successful is they can take very successful Indians out of India just for 4 years for university, 2 years for a job, 3 years on a visa. And then they come back and they bring all that knowledge back to India. Because one thing I will say is fascinating about Indians. They are Indian first, right? Even if they are, what do you call them, ABCDs?
American-born confused desis.
Yes. Even
if they're American-born Indians, yeah.
They're still Indian first.
Yeah.
Right? And that cultural identity is very powerful. And I think the government of India understands that cultural identity is going to continue to mean that all of your successful Indians bring that success back to India. You yourself are successful worldwide. You bring that success back to India. right? You bring that reputation, you bring that wealth, you bring the currency, the tax base, you bring the business, whatever, you bring it back to India. So India is correct to be thinking that education is important. Educate more Indians, find more talent, create more talent that can go out in the world and come back and be successful again. I think one of the weaknesses in India is that they are still trying to replace existing processes. They're trying to step in and be the new manufacturing base. But wealth doesn't come from manufacturing. Wealth comes from creating high tech, high ticket price, high value solutions. The United States created their empire following World War II by being the epicenter for technological development. The reason China stole so much from the West was because China knew that if they were ever going to stop being the world's manufacturing base and all the pollution and the water structure and the infrastructure challenges that come with being a manufacturing base, if they were going to get past that, they had to focus on technology. So they focused on telecom, and they focused on electric vehicles, and they focused on internet and AI and robotics. Well, India is now seeing an opportunity to become the new manufacturer, but that's not going to be what makes them very wealthy. That's not going to be what makes them truly independent. India has an opportunity to essentially create another competitor to China, because India has the kind of relationships with the United States where the United States will gladly give intellectual property to India that they would never give to the Chinese, right? They would give India the opportunity to create semiconductors so that we wouldn't have to be so dependent on Taiwan. They would give India the opportunity to manufacture fighter weapons, tanks, airplanes, trucks, avionics, drones. We would give that to India. These are technologies that come at a very high price versus trinkets, toys, clothes that come at a very low price, right? China grew on trinkets and clothes. India was at the same time a competitor to China in terms of basic manufacturing, but India hasn't yet realized that it can skip a level. It can skip right to high-tech development by stealing from China, by bartering with the United States, simply by being an alternative, because the United States, above all things, doesn't want China to succeed. That's what America wants more than anything. Just don't let China succeed. So we'll help India succeed if it keeps China from succeeding. I think China knows that, and that's part of why they have increased their offensive position against India. And I think India understands it's in the crosshairs of China. So they're trying to maintain friendships with everybody, like you said. But that's a vulnerability for India. If India doesn't take a chance soon, then it's going to be stuck as the manufacturing hub of the world for the next 30 years. The air quality is going to get worse. The water quality is going to get worse. Poverty is going to get worse. You're going to keep having more children than you can educate because you simply don't make enough GDP for everybody.
You keep saying that China steals from America. In what ways?
China steals from America in every way.
Do you think TikTok is a way to steal certain things?
I do.
Why?
I absolutely do.
Why?
I think TikTok is more of a tool for influence than it is for theft. The way that TikTok is used for theft is that the algorithm and the mass data collection is owned by the Chinese. So now they know what age groups are watching what content, what genders are being influenced by what messages, what gets the most likes, what gets the most dislikes, what geographic region logs in the most, what internet provider is used the most, how much time people on average spend on TikTok, which can be, expanded to how much time they spend online. Imagine if you wanted to do harm to a country. How useful is that information? How useful is it to know that there are more people using more hours of TikTok on a Verizon-based internet provider in Chicago than anywhere else in the country? How are you going to prioritize which internet provider you shut down first? Well, it's like, this is easy. Let's learn how to shut down the Verizon internet server. Because if we can kill that one server in Chicago, we're going to shut down Chicago, but it's probably also going to shut down other parts of the country. That's what they get to learn. We can see that there are everybody talks about children, like 10 to 15 is what we all think of when we think about the influence that TikTok has. My concern is all the adults that are on TikTok. You know how many people recognize me from TikTok and I don't even have a TikTok account? People recognize me from TikTok because I'm on somebody else's TikTok feed. But the average person who uses TikTok, they don't realize that the content they're watching isn't always controlled by the personality that they're seeing. And they don't bother to look in the lower left corner to see who's actually creating the content. So how much influence do you have, not over 15-year-olds who have very little impact, but influence over 40-year-olds, 60-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 20-year-olds? How much of the challenge that America is going through right now culturally because of the social media age has been cultivated in part by TikTok, but in part by Meta, in part by all of the social media companies. We already know that 2016 elections were tampered with by the Russians through Facebook and through what was then Twitter. Like, they know this. So what are we doing about it? That's my answer to how is China stealing? Do I think TikTok is a tool? They steal the metadata, but then they use that metadata to create influence on the right networks.
Do you also feel it can be a great spy tool? Because probably it's listening to your conversations, tracking your location.
It's not probably. It's all of social media are phenomenal spy tools. Here's a major difference. People remember the 1960s and 70s when CIA would create its own technology. We would create the SR-71. We would create drone aircraft. We would create Stuxnet and blow up centrifuges in Iran, right? We would create technologies from scratch. So now some of the best technology that we use out there isn't developed by CIA. It's developed in the open market. It's developed by innovators and engineers. One of the biggest tools that the United States uses to create new technology isn't engineering, it's investment. We can invest in a new technology, and part of that investment means they're not allowed to share it with anybody else. So that's how we can stay one step ahead of everything, because the United States has become the tech innovative sector of the world.
थैंक यू सो मच ये क्लिप एंड तक देखने के लिए. अगर आपको और भी ऐसी क्लिप्स देखनी है तो राज शमानी क्लिप्स चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कर लीजिए.